Alyce Santoro, spelled Alyce Santoro. Almost a Japanese sound to that name. September 7th, 2012, at the Marfa Public Library movie theater. Alyce, my friend, let's start from the beginning. I met you, weirdly, in Joshua Tree? Or was it Los Angeles?
Joshua Tree.
And I should have known then, I think I did know then, that big things were in store, because you were there pushing a film that had to do with microbes?
Jellyfish.
And jellyfish are kind of like a macro example of a microbe, right?
They're planktonic, yeah, so they are sort of a strange creature.
But anyway, what tipped me off to coolness there was that you had combined two things that too infrequently are combined in our world, which is right and left thinking, math and science, the beauty of nature, the nature of beauty, right?
Gosh, Jason, thanks for saying all that.
And then I think fate pulled us apart, and you went back to your home, which was Brooklyn, and you pursued what?
Well, I was in a weird place when you met me. I had moved to Brooklyn from Providence, where I studied scientific illustration. And I was working in the daytime as a marine biologist. I had a job as a research assistant in marine biology. I knew
in Brooklyn?
Well, in Providence, in Rhode Island, the ocean state.
Okay.
So let me go back just a tiny bit further to get you to Brooklyn.
Actually, let's go back even further. Start from, where are you from?
Okay, I grew up in a log cabin on a lake about 60 miles west of Manhattan, and my dad commuted into New York City every day. So I had the best of both worlds. The Appalachian Trail ran right behind my house, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom and made all our clothes and cooked our food, and meanwhile I had the mountain as my friend and all of the creatures that lived there. I was an only child. I'm still an only child, and I feel like a lot of what happened later came from living in a rural place, but also having access to New York City. So when I was in high school, my punk band could play at CBGB's, and yet I still lived in the woods and taught sailing, and lived on this lake and was very involved in the water and the mountains. So I knew from an early age that I wanted to combine art and science. That I loved nature, but I felt like the scientists themselves weren't really able to convey that information. That wasn't their job, to convey the magic and the mystery and the beauty of nature. They were about doing research, which wasn't necessarily about communication. So I decided that was what I was going to do from an early age, and I didn't really know how exactly that was going to manifest itself, but I decided that while I was in high school, I was trying to figure out, am I going to study science? Am I going to study art? Should I study music? I played the flute, and I wanted to combine everything, so I decided the best course of action would be to get a degree in science first, because I didn't know that I would ever be able to go back once I had a degree in art and study science. So I went to Southampton College, which no longer exists, but it was on the end of Long Island, and it was one of the best marine biology schools in the country. And I had an amazing education in the ocean, basically. From day one, I was out on boats with seines collecting plankton and flounder and stuff and studying.
You said a word I didn't understand, with seines?
Yeah, like nets.
Okay.
From day one, we were out on the water. And I spent a semester living on a schooner in the Caribbean, and I got to go to the South Pacific and study stuff there. It was the most incredible undergraduate education, really, I think one could have. And it was very rigorous as well. I studied a ton of chemistry and physics and all this stuff, and I feel like I really learned how to think. There was also a woman there who taught scientific illustration, so I did take some scientific illustration while I was there. And also there was a guy who was a composer who composed music for whatever musicians were around. So I got to study sort of, new music, all at the same time. Then I went to Rhode Island School of Design. They had a graduate program in scientific illustration. There aren't that many scientific illustration programs in the country. A lot of them are medical illustration programs. But RISD has a natural science illustration program. So I went directly from Southampton in my Volkswagen Beetle with all of my worldly possessions to Providence, thinking that I would wait tables or whatever, never thinking that I would actually get a job in marine biology while I studied scientific illustration. But sure enough, I was able to get a job at URI on a salmon aquaculture project. So I got to design experiments, and I got to do this research on salmon. We were trying to figure out if adding L-carnitine to their diet would make them have less fat and more meat. And in fact, now you see L-carnitine in health food stores.
Yeah.
It's used by people. That was partly from some of that research. Then I got another job after that grant ended, studying plankton, microzooplankton in the North Atlantic on a project called GLOBEC, which is Global Ocean Ecosystems Dynamics. And there were people from all over the world all studying on these same research vessels. So I got to go on ships, mostly out of Woods Hole, with scientists from all over the world, all studying different aspects of global change. And that was on George's Bank, which is a giant swath of a plateau under the ocean in the North Atlantic. And it was completely phenomenal to be a scientist by day and then go to art school at RISD at night. Really, scientific illustration isn't art school, but the way that I approached it, I went into every single studio that I could. I took letterpress and silkscreen, and also at that time, Providence was just an incredibly fertile place because a lot of the factories had moved out. We were all living in these incredible loft spaces for a couple $100 a month. There was just space to do amazing things. And there was a ton of cross-pollination. So people were sharing silkscreen equipment and playing in bands and doing all this amazing stuff. And I started to make art about science. It was not scientific illustration. I mean, for my classes, I would have to render skate egg cases with a rapidograph or whatever with pen and ink. But then I was, wearing a satellite dish hat and collecting found objects from the street and making stuff. That was a way of conveying the magic and the mystery of science. But there was no such thing at that time in early 90s. There was no such thing that I knew of as like an eco artist. I just knew that this was my calling. So after 12 years of living in Rhode Island, I had a body of work, and I decided I was going to try my hand in Brooklyn as an artist. Pretty naive. I mean, I was married to a really amazing painter. He was fantastic and taught me a lot about art. He went to art school, and so I started to learn about the art world really from him and his friends. But I decided that I had to go to New York by myself. And so it's a long story why, but I just sort of had to pick up and do it. And I did. And I moved in with my friend Jennifer Zakin, who is an incredible artist herself, and she was in the Whitney Biennial that year, 2002. And
what is that, Whitney Biennial?
The Whitney Biennial is a giant, very prestigious art show for, a lot of times for emerging artists. They usually throw one or two old-timers in there, but really it's like everyone in the world is looking at it as like the up-and-coming.
So you moved
generation.
to Brooklyn,
Yeah.
and your roommate was actually someone who knew what was going on, was an emerging artist.
Totally. And so I kind of crash-landed into this emerging artist world. So I knew kind of what residencies to do or apply for, and kind of got into the art world groove pretty quickly, very fortunately. So I made a lot of connections and did my work, and I got a residency at the Lower East Side print shop, so that was really fantastic. So I got a studio right away also. I didn't mention that I got a grant from Rhode Island State Council on the Arts in the new genres category, which was really life-changing for me because I was married to this incredible painter, and everywhere we ever went, I was sort of the wife of this guy.
But you weren't living with him, though?
Yeah, we were.
Oh,
in Rhode Island. He didn't move to Brooklyn with me.
Did you stop being married when you...
We didn't for a while because we really still didn't want to be divorced. We really wanted to be married to each other. But eventually it became clear that he was going in a different direction and I was going in a different direction. Okay. So we still really care about each other a lot, and he's still great.
Important to note.
So Brooklyn. So I made a lot of connections and stuff. and did my work. And then after, I guess, 5 or so years of living there, I signed a contract with a textile distributor to market this textile that I invented made out of cassette tape. Mm-hmm. And that was a whole kind of fluky thing in itself. Like, that was, Sonic Fabric was one of the pieces I moved to New York with. I had 2 panels of this quirky fabric that I made out of cassette tapes. And I thought that was the end of the project. But when I got there, a lot of my friends saw it and were like, oh my God, this is an industrial design. Like, we need to find out how you can make more of it. So during the course of the 5 years that I lived in New York, I managed to find a little factory, actually back in Rhode Island, that could weave the fabric. And I found people who were interested in buying it. And then I signed a contract with this distributor and thought, okay, well, this will be some income for the first time really ever. I was waiting tables and I was teaching sailing in Manhattan.
I know acoustic fabric is an important part of your life. Tell us more what it looks like, what it does,
Sure. It started out that I wanted to make a fabric literally woven from sound. It was inspired by 2 things. When I was a kid, I grew up on this lake racing small sailboats. And on small sailboats, people often use little strands of cassette tape to tell the way the wind's blowing because it's a light, durable, ubiquitous material. And when I was a kid, I used to imagine that I could hear whatever my dad had recorded onto the tape, Cat Stevens or the Beatles or Beethoven or whatever, wafting out into the wind. Years later, as an undergrad, I had a residency at UC Santa Cruz studying marine mammal bioacoustics, and while there, I met my first sort of hippie-type people, and they were into Tibetan prayer flags. And I learned that this idea that these small pieces of fabric are printed, silk-screened with mantras, pictures of sacred sounds that are supposed to be activated when the wind blows through them, and these great...
You're talking about a Tibetan
prayer flags.
Right, and that a Tibetan prayer flag kind of combines fabric and
sound. But there's not actual real sound imbued in the fabric. It's a picture of the sound that is activated by the wind. And when I saw that, it made me think of the Telltales when I was a kid. I thought, well, that reminds me of hearing sound coming off the cassette tape, so I decided at that moment, which was like 1989, because that was the year of the big quake in Santa Cruz, that I would eventually weave a fabric made of sound. And so in 1989, I started collecting tapes.
Okay, now, why did you bring up Santa Cruz?
Because that is where I first learned about prayer flags.
Okay, but you were still living in Brooklyn?
No, this was way before I was an undergrad.
Oh, so you had the idea for your sound fabric.
Like 20 years before I actually implemented it.
And it was gestating.
It was gestating for a really long time.
Okay.
So I started collecting tapes one by one, had no idea how I would weave them together. I'm not a weaver, I'm not a textile designer. It wasn't until in Providence in like 1998 or something that I decided to knit the tapes together. And I was in a cafe, White Electric Cafe in Providence, knitting. And a friend of mine saw me and said, and he was the lab tech guy for the looms at RISD, for the textile shop. And he said, why don't we take your bag of 100 tapes over to RISD and we'll see if we can weave it there. And we did. Mm-hmm. And we got this incredible product, this thing that it looks like a shiny canvas. It's a very tight weave. I thought it was going to be like a loose, flimsy thing. It totally wasn't. And in fact, when I moved to New York with my 2 small panels of fabric woven from 100 individual tapes, I went to a salon that Louise Bourgeois was hosting, because Louise Bourgeois used to host salons at her house in Chelsea every Sunday. I brought it to her, and when she saw it, I said, this is fabric woven from tape. And she said, but what does it do? And in that moment, I sort of made something up, because it really didn't do anything. It was just a prayer flag. It was supposed to be sort of my idea of this fabric woven from sound. I study Peruvian shamanism, and I sort of immediately whipped up this ritual using the fabric where we create a kind of an altar using the fabric. Anyway, one thing led to another. Now I weave hundreds of yards of fabric at a time at this little mom-and-pop textile mill in Rhode Island, and I sell yardage, little bits, and I sell small wearable accessories that I consider like wearable works of art. Neckties and purses and little things that people can use in their everyday life, because for me it's important that art have some kind of everyday life sort of function. And that's how I make a living. I sell little tiny things.
And you don't live in Brooklyn. You live
No, I don't.
in Alpine, Texas.
I do.
And you're not married to that previous person, but you are very tight with a fellow by the name of Julian.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
And perhaps most surprisingly, I realized that meeting me was actually just a very small, trivial blip on the motion picture of your life. Because you didn't mention that at all.
Okay, so back to meeting Jason. So I moved to New York, and I was very unsure of whether I had made the right decision. I mean, I left a kind of stable life, really good guy, and I feel like when I met you, that drive across the country from New York to Joshua Tree was kind of an epic journey for me. Like, it was really cool that my movie was in that little film festival, my movie about jellyfish, which, in fact, that movie, which is called Heckle's Dream, I shot on Super 8, black and white Super 8 film in Acadia National Park in Maine. I happened to be the artist in residence there, and I happened to have my Super 8 movie camera on me as this crazy phenomenon was happening, which was that the wind and the tide were blowing exactly the right way. And so all of these jellyfish, like hundreds of them, lion's mane jellyfish, super beautiful, were washing ashore on this rocky beach. And I was completely helpless because you cannot help a jellyfish. There's really, especially a stinging one, there's really nothing you can do. And like I said before, they're planktonic. They are at the mercy of the wind and the tide. And I felt like that was the perfect metaphor for everything, and for my life in particular. That really, and the other thing that connected us when we met is that I was into my Choose Determinism project, and I think I had a Choose Determinism bumper sticker, and you had a pro-choicelessness sticker. And so I knew that we would connect. Right. So anyway, I was on sort of an epic journey using the jellyfish movie as an excuse to think and see the country. I had never driven across the country before, and so that's when you and I met. Okay, well, let's move slowly along to get to West Texas. Okay, so I came to West Texas, I'm going to say 2005 maybe was the first time. I came down here with my roommate's brother, who... What year, I'm sorry, what year were you in Joshua Tree doing your film stuff? Probably that same year. I'm going to say, because I knew I had been to Marfa before, one time before, but I wasn't living here, but I wanted another excuse to come down here. When I first came down here... So when and why then did you come to Marfa? Right, okay. I came to Marfa because my roommate's brother was going through a bad breakup and needed a road trip buddy to come to this strange place in the middle of the desert where there were artists. And I had written off the desert completely, especially Texas. I sort of had a prejudice. I'd written off artists. I don't blame you, really. I am, studied marine biology. I'm a water person. It never crossed my mind that there was really anything much to see in the middle of the country. But I felt I owed it to the middle of the country to see it before I wrote it off completely. So I decided to come down here and on this crazy road trip. And when I arrived, it was really breathtaking and life-changing. I felt that the light and the landscape were different than anything I had ever experienced before in my life. Like, I love gray, foggy, rocky coastline. I like the sound of bell buoys and seagulls, creaking ships and rigging. I like those sounds. But this place was different on every level. It was like going to another planet. And I felt like that's what I really needed. Like, I was going through this life change, and I felt like it was reprogramming me somehow on some deep level. So when I went back to New York, I really never put it out of my mind. I always kept thinking about this place. But really, the Davis Mountains were what really drew me. There's something about the quality of the soundscape in the Davis Mountains. I don't know if it's the rock itself or something, but it makes this sound that just appeals to me. So when I signed the contract with Design Tex, and I knew that I would have a little tiny bit of income at least, I decided it was time to leave New York. Also, my great old ramshackle house that I was living in for practically nothing got sold to a corporate developer, and they were raising the rent, and it just seemed like the right moment to kind of do something totally different. So I came down here on a complete whim. And I moved to Fort Davis, and I rented 2 little adobe houses in downtown Fort Davis, and I painted Center for the Obvious on the side of one of them that had my studio in it. Center for the Obvious is kind of your spirit organization. Yes, yeah. It is. And it was actually started by my punk band group back in high school. So
Which were called what?
We were called Road Pizza.
And was that the only punk band that had a violin in it?
Flute.
Flute.
I don't know. There might have been other punk bands with
Few and far between, though.
Yeah, but I had an electric pickup inspired by Laurie Anderson. I had my dad take me into the city when I was, 15, and get an electric pickup and pedals. So I had effects pedals and stuff.
We know why you came here, and what keeps you here?
Well, I met Julian about 6 months after I got here.
But wait. So were you living in Marfa, or were you living in the DMR, Davis Mountain Resort?
I was living in downtown Fort Davis.
Why?
I really love Fort Davis. Like, I didn't want to live in Marfa because I felt like Marfa would be my, community, and that all my friends were here.
So may I analyze?
Yeah.
You were repeating what you did in your childhood. Manhattan was Marfa, and the log cabin was Fort Davis.
Yeah, in a way. I also feel like I sort of like to be on the periphery. Like, I'm not a very social person. I'm not a good party person. And
that's true.
Fort Davis is.
You are social.
Well, I like to talk to people, but I'm sort of antisocial. I'm sort of a recluse. Like, I need to hide myself away. I like being sort of away from the main hub of the action, and I felt like Marfa was too much action for me. Hard to believe, I know, but anyway, I like the beauty over there. I like the train, but I also like the lack of train. I like the no train situation in Fort Davis. It's very quiet. And I think that's what I was really after, is ultra quiet. So what keeps me here? So
we were going on meeting Julian.
Right. So 6 months after I moved here, I was planning on being a spinster, by the way. I was moved down here to be single.
Which is a cool thing.
Yeah, it would have been cool. But then I met Julian. He is a friend of friends. And let's see, how did we even... Oh, yeah, we met at a friend's house in Alpine who invited us over for dinner. And we started talking about politics and music and the relationship of all of these things.
Yeah, you guys are much on the same page.
Yeah, I could go on about him all day. He's a fascinating person, and...
Is he from this area?
He grew up in Alpine, but his parents were both music teachers, and they toured with his brother and sister as a guitar quintet. They toured Europe and South America, Mexico, and this country, playing in the 70s and 80s, playing this extremely obscure and very beautiful quintet music that was, a lot of it is written by Germans. Like, there was a guitar choir movement that happened in the 60s and 70s, music for multiple guitars. It's fascinating.
I once saw Robert Fripp do like a 12-person guitar thing.
Very cool.
Anyway, as long as we're talking about Julian, let's talk about, since you've been here, I think you've been kind of a full-time artist.
Yeah.
And you and Julian, when there is a show, it seems like you're both participating in. Mm-hmm. But sometimes the name on the project is yours.
That tends to happen. I think at first he was kind of shy. He also was a bit put off by the idea of artists. He didn't really understand what artists were all about. But and he's sort of coming, it's a long story. He's sort of coming out of his shell, but he's my constant collaborator, I'd say, on absolutely everything. So he's the one who suggested that we move to the Davis Mountain Resort because his family had some land up there that they had purchased in the 80s that had a little 14-foot travel trailer on it, and he decided that it was silly to pay rent in downtown Fort Davis when we could live rent-free in the mountains 10 miles up a dirt road. Mm-hmm. And at first I was completely baffled by this idea because we had no phone up there or internet, and I had no studio. But he overcame all of those obstacles. We bought a school bus that we found in Fort Davis and restored the carburetor and drove it up to the Davis Mountains, so we had an instant studio. And then we got a phone and we got satellite internet. So that's how we were living for the last 4 years. We lived in a 14-foot travel trailer with the idea that we were going to build a house, and we're still sort of in the process of building a house out of papercrete. But it's been a fantastic experiment because we learned how to grow food in a greenhouse, and we learned about water catchment and permaculture. And I think a lot, my work is about living as sustainably as possible, or finding ways to tread more softly on the planet and share that information. Mm-hmm. And so it was critical. It was critical information to have. We would still be up there, except that Julian's mom, who has a house in Alpine, decided to move on spur of the moment to the coast of Oregon and abandon her house. So during the drought and the fires, it was convenient to be down here because you can turn the water faucet on and water comes out, unlike up there where we just have rainwater harvesting.
When I first moved to Marfa, I knew one person and a half. You being the half, because you didn't live in Marfa. But the one person was David Beebe.
Yes.
And I was surprised, I guess, to find out that he knew you because, you were two people from totally separate areas of my life. Though I actually recorded with David Beebe in Joshua Tree, and I met you in Joshua Tree. And he knew who you were, and he said, "Oh, yeah, she's great. I really like her." And, you guys he is a social creature, completely. He is a guy who is constant, and you were, as you pointed out, not. So what was your interaction with Marfa, and how did David get to know you? And tell us about your Marfa life a little bit when you were living in the DMR.
Well, I'll tell you about my Marfa life. I was completely intimidated by the scene here. Like I said, I'm kind of shy. And to me, Marfa seemed like something that I wanted to break into or wanted to be friends with people here.
I'm so glad to hear this, because this is like proof number 18,000 that the inside and the outside are very much dissimilar in many of us, in the whole world. You had dreads, long dreads at the time, a haircut that I associate with people who are much cooler than myself. You made movies and you played songs. Those are things that cool people do. You weren't buried in a computer or a button pusher or anything like that. So it amazes me that you didn't just come down here feeling like you owned the place. I
absolutely did not feel that way. And in fact, I'm amazed that David Beebe even knew who I was, since I was completely intimidated by him. I mean, he's super cool.
Well, when we interview him, I really want to know what he. It might take a lot of beers, but I'd love to know what he feels like inside, because maybe that super coolness is the super coolness I saw in you. Maybe he doesn't read it that way.
Well, I think some people are just generally more outgoing and gregarious. I mean, I have a very weird penchant for finding the niche that I want to be part of and then completely avoiding it. In Rhode Island, in Providence, right this day, there's a thing called AS220, which is a fantastic community-run art space. And I lived there for 12 years and was for 12 years completely too intimidated to ever go there or do anything much because of my science background. I think because I feel at heart that I'm a scientist, that, when people meet me, they're going to know that I'm like a fraud or something. I don't know, I'm not really an artist somehow.
Okay. Well,
I'm getting over that, though.
Not a moment too soon. Okay, so you come to Marfa, but I would love to know really specifically what intimidated you. Was it the reputation? Was it meeting people who button their shirts to the top button? Was it the...
Yeah, I mean, I think people here... Gosh, it's probably me, but the ballroom has a certain image, and I mean, everybody has a certain coolness image, and I felt like I couldn't possibly have lived up to that. I was just happier to stay in my studio and work, which is kind of great because, you get a lot done that way if you're not.
Do you sing?
I don't sing, no.
Can you sing on key?
Yeah, I guess I can. Yeah.
So, yeah, okay. So you could probably belt it out if you... felt compelled to?
Yeah, I could probably.
Okay, so now you clearly feel comfortable in Marfa.
Yes.
You're at the farm stand selling your fabric and other stuff. You're at the bookstore doing John Cage stuff. I've seen you do Center for the Obvious Productions at Masonic Lodge. I'm trying to casually point out that you're a successful artist here. So what turned around?
Well, I think it's been a long, slow process of finding my niche. And like I said in the beginning, there was no such thing as an eco-artist. And in fact, art and activism was sort of taboo. If you wanted to be a part of the art world, you weren't an activist, because activism was a turnoff. Kind of like talking about politics or religion or whatever at a fancy dinner or something. It's just not done. And I feel like for me, that was part of my insecurity, or not insecurity, but just not knowing where I fit in. And I think I've had a where I fit in issue for a long, long time. I mean, I didn't fit in the art world. I wasn't a scientist. I've been kind of navigating this strange place. In 2006, I went to a residency program at Blue Mountain Center in upstate New York. Okay, Blue Mountain Center is a residency program for activists in upstate New York.
Let me just absorb that. It's a residency program. Activists meaning political activists.
Political, social, environmental, any kind of activist.
Okay, it's not an artist thing.
Well, it is for artists. It's for artists, composers, writers, people who are trying to make a difference through using creative means, make a difference in the world. And I felt that I was doing that, and so I applied and was accepted, and all of a sudden I was in the middle of these people, such as Chris Carlson, who started Critical Mass in San Francisco, which is the bicycle. Yeah, it's a mass of people riding bicycles that has spread all over the world. So here I was with like these kind of world-class activists. And here I was more of like a philosophical activist or something, like a social activist of a small caliber or something. I didn't know. But I learned so much and decided in that moment that I was going to accept the fact that here I was, and my thing was combining art and science and really making yet a third discipline, another discipline, because I feel that art is very important, I feel that science is very important, and the scientific method is very important. But now the scientific method is not doing us any good in a social context. Way too much of the scientific method has leached over into the way that we think about the world. And everything has to be quantifiable. Things that we can't see aren't real. We don't trust emotions, So that, as an artist, those are all the things that I feel are important. And that's what made me want to make art about science in the first place. So I would say since 2006, I have discovered that I have an important role, and that it's more important by the day because of the situation with the climate and with the situation with the environment. I mean, as the environment decays as a result of human activity, it becomes more urgent that people communicate effectively about how this can be stopped. I feel that this can be stopped by reconnecting humanity with nature. And I feel in a unique position to be able to do this because of my background, because I did study science and I studied art and I grew up in a mountain on a lake. I can convey this information about how humans can reconnect to nature and feel compelled to make a difference.
Right.
So that's the part that I feel like I can help.
Okay, well, bringing it back to Marfa then, and tell me, I am going to put words in your mouth, but you tell me if they're the wrong words.
Okay.
Maybe the place that West Texas allowed you to feel connected and at home and in your own right, in your own space, is here. And with this time, you found that the warning and the caution that science is offering us about the world and the climate is something that is not getting through to people, but maybe it can get through to people if communicated through art.
Absolutely.
Good.
Absolutely. I recently wrote a couple of articles in response to Bill McKibben's big Climate Change's Terrifying New Math article that came out in Rolling Stone. And I wrote 2 responses, both of which were published in Truth Out. My responses...
Truth Out in the paper magazine?
Truth Out online, okay. Yeah. My responses to... And Bill, to give Bill McKibben a ton of credit, I mean, he's a fantastic communicator. Like, he does get people to understand that there's a problem, but he hasn't offered tangible solutions or been able to use the data that he's been great at disseminating to inspire people to know what to do. In other words, we can say every day that some crazy weather event is happening and blame it on climate change, but that doesn't help us understand, well, what do I do? It just tends really to make people feel overwhelmed and, in fact, inspires people to do nothing because it feels too big. There's nothing that we can do. So my responses to the article were basically that until we keep calling the environment something outside of ourselves and referring to the data as something abstract, we won't feel connected to it. I mean, a lot of science tends to be an abstraction because it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be objective. That's part of the scientific method. We have to remove ourselves from it. Well, in order to resolve the kinds of problems we have now, we need to reconnect. And that's what I'm hoping that I can do.
Tell me how some of the stuff you're doing connects viewers or participants in your stuff with what's going on in the world, as you see it.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to... Okay, what I've always done is I've made things that I call philosoprops. Philosoprops are, they could be a three-dimensional object, they could be a small booklet, they could be a poster, and they're designed to invite people to think about something in a certain way. One of my early posters is a lithograph of a DNA molecule, and underneath it says 92% junk, and then with a big asterisk, and then according to science. And it just turns out, I made this poster in 2000. It turns out there was an article in the Times 2 days ago saying that scientists were in fact wrong, that they should have called it mystery DNA. And that was exactly the point that I was trying to make 12 years ago with this poster, which I was hanging in laboratories, because I found that the scientists themselves kind of needed to be jolted out of ruts that can naturally happen when you're looking at something very closely for long periods of time.
Well, you know, when I saw that, it made me think like, well, first of all, I completely agree with you. And I think that anyone who was not a scientist would never have called it junk DNA. And it reminded me of how smart we are now not to call dark matter junk matter.
Exactly.
Or dark energy junk energy. Because the real answer is, and this has come into vogue happily, there is now among scientists and technical people much more of an inclination to say, I don't know, rather than pronounce things junk.
Yeah, that is a great development. And I think part of it is the realms of science that we've gotten into. Quantum physics really leads us into this crazy world where nothing is as it seemed. So
I saw an exhibit of yours at the Masonic Lodge here in Marfa TX, and you had, well, tell us what you had.
The exhibit at the Masonic was sponsored by Ballroom, and they selected me as the Texas Biennial Artist Representative that year, which I was very grateful for. I was able to present an entire show based on my application to the Buckminster Fuller Institute, which was titled The Synergetic Omni Solution. The Synergetic Omni Solution...
I'm going to say it slow. Synergetic Omni Solution.
The Synergetic Omni Solution.
That's
yes.
like saying universes of things in 3 words.
Thanks, Jason. Yeah, I had hoped that. I, for years, since the Buckminster Fuller Institute began implementing this challenge that they have, I think it's every 2 years, Buckminster Fuller Challenge is asking for people to submit ideas that are what Bucky would have referred to as a trim tab. A trim tab is a teeny tiny rudder on a giant ship, and the teeny tiny rudder is really the thing that's responsible for turning the ship around. Bucky was... In fact, it was Bucky's epitaph. It's on his gravestone, "Call me Trim Tab," because he was looking for solutions to giant problems that are simply implementable. I feel that one of the most simply implementable solutions that we have right now is for everyone to be invited to be part of the solution. During World War II, for example, we had the Victory Garden campaign, "Use it up, wear it out, make it do or do without," that the United States and Britain...
Use it up. Do without.
Use it up, wear it out.
Use it up, wear it out,
make it do or do without. Yes, it was on posters. If you pick up a Life magazine from 1942 to 44, every single advertisement for anything says, here's our pants, but don't buy pants unless you really need pants because our boys overseas need pants. Or it was basically like everything was all about reusing and conserving. And these are the kinds of technologies that we have available to us right now, but that are not being implemented at all. After 9/11, George Bush said, go shopping. He didn't say, let's get off foreign oil, everybody. We can do this together. Let's come together as a nation and conserve and repair things.
Only a handful of years before that, Jimmy Carter did say
That's
that,
right.
And he lost the election. And so let me just carry on with this. I was going to say it's easy to blame politicians and public officials because they're visible, but they are there because the majority votes for them.
Okay, Jason, we could really go off on a tangent on that one. But I will say this, that our culture right now has, over the course of the last, let's say, 50 or 60 years, become about manufacturing stuff and needing to consume the stuff that we manufacture. So that is why, we're basically left with a couple of choices of people to vote for that are all basically wanting to keep the same system in place, which is the system that encourages us to consume in order to be good patriots or good countrymen.
Yeah.
And so what we really need, and Jimmy Carter was kind of, touching on it, but never got, there was already too much emphasis he was going against the current. There was already too much tide pushing away. But the bottom line is that we need an entirely new civilization. We need a culture that is not based on consumerism. It's not based on how much crap you can possibly purchase with dollars. I mean, and that's what is going to be very hard for anyone in a political position to convey. That's why we need somebody else, such as the Buckminster Fuller Institute or 350.org or artists such as myself, the Center for the Improbable and in Permacultural Research, or the Center for the Obvious. We need to... this is why I thought I would take it upon myself to try to catalyze this technology, which is our ability to come together around something and realize that together we all can make a difference.
Let me bring it home a little bit.
Yeah.
And we've been talking globally for a while.
Yeah.
And you've been trying to manufacture some techniques, some strategies, how we may affect global work by reducing the problem to something that we can understand personally. Use Marfa. What are the issues? Is an issue Marfa is facing today? And I don't want to. It doesn't need to be like economic or social collapse. It could just be like cost too much to get a beer, whatever.
Yeah. Okay. So let me say this. So after the Synergetic Omni solution launched in 2011, Occupy started. Occupy started in New York on September 17th of that same year. So you saw the stuff at the Masonic in the spring. By the fall, Occupy had started. So now I realized that the Synergetic Omni solution was Occupy. So I started Occupy Marfa, a Facebook page. And we got together a group of maybe 10 or 12 people to talk about exactly this issue. What are the things that that are an issue for us here? I could name a whole lot of them. One, for example, is border stuff. Like, we have an incredibly vibrant community just a few miles south of here. It's another country. They have incredible art and music and culture. And we've been really cut off from that more and more. In fact, since 9/11, the border has become more militarized and shut down. When Julian grew up here, you could go across the border to Boquillas and get a taco for a couple bucks. It was really a wonderful thing to do. And that was keeping that economy alive, and it was making our lives more vibrant because we had an experience of, neighborliness with our people to the south. So that has been on the wane for quite some time. So one of the ideas that we had with Occupy Marfa was, how can we create more cross-border pollination? We're working on these ideas. We also decided that we would celebrate some of the things that are going right here, to try to emphasize the things that are going right here. We don't have a branch of Goldman Sachs or Bank of America, but we have small banks. So we had a Thank Your Banker Day. So we brought the bankers, local Chip Love and the Community Credit Union people, to come and tell us why we should keep our money in local banks and what the benefits of that are. The farmers market, the farm stand, is an incredible thing. It's one of the few places in this town where people from all different aspects of the community come together under one roof, literally. We've got the burrito ladies, and we've got the fancy bread lady, and we have all kinds of incredible things that happen. Local economy stuff is happening. Melinda makes goat cheese, and, it's just like a way to support the community, to keep money in the community. So those are all things that are happening in a microcosmic sense that resonate out into the big world. So there's tons of things that we can do here.
Well, that's great. I mean, those are huge. Tell me one more time. I'm sorry, I'm eating ice. Who Chip spoke to? Who was in that group?
Well, it was a group of the Occupy Marfa people. Do you want specific names?
No, just like how many people?
I'd say there were maybe 15 people who showed up.
And was that spearheaded by you?
Well, it was spearheaded by Occupy Marfa. So we got together and discussed what we could do to make a difference.
Who spearheaded Occupy Marfa?
Well, I guess you'd say me, but I mean, there are others who contributed ideas, and
Well, I think you're being modest. I have an idea.
Okay.
You are going to have either grandchildren or admirers in future generations. And this might be one of the documents they listen to. And so if you wanted to give a little bit of Alyce Santoro to the future, do you have anything to share?
Well, I won't have grandchildren because I'm terrified of the future, and I don't have kids because I really, really, truly am scared for the future. So I hope that whatever I'm trying to do now, I just want to say that I really feel incredibly compelled to try to do whatever I can to make this world better and make it so that there is a future and make it so that other people's grandchildren will have a nice world to live in. But I look around at the kids in this town who I love and I'm scared.
May I challenge you?
Yeah.
Okay. It seems to be one kind of bonding pattern, trait, characteristic of the past, as far back as we can trace it, is that people in the past have always been afraid of the future.
Yeah, my dad gives me this line. He was a philosophy major. He tells me this all the time. Yeah. I think it's worse now. Fukushima, fuel pool number 4, I don't know if you're following this, but if there's an earthquake in Japan right now, the entire world will be radiated. It's already being radiated, as we know, but that fuel pool, if that reactor thing explodes, then all of the other fuel pools that are there are going to explode. It's on a scale that is unlike anything in our past. Yes, I hear that argument. I understand that everybody has their apocalyptic, fear or whatever. But it seems to me that is on such a huge scale, and there are so many human beings on the face of the planet, not the kind that are living in harmony with the earth, because there's plenty of those. I'm worried about the ones who are not living in harmony with the earth, and there's too many of those. And we're destroying the planet. We're destroying it really fast.
Can you say something quaint about Marfa TX, like you like old people or Mexican food or something, just to bring it down a few notches?
This place is an incredible inspiration. I live here because it feels safe and it feels like an island in a way. Yeah. Like we're all on our own island here, and there's like-minded people that we can have great conversations with and share our art. And I think that does fill me with hope. I love to see the kids trick-or-treating and doing normal things that I did when I was a kid, because that's what I wish for every kid, that they could just have a peaceful, safe life. And that's what the kids who are growing up today in Marfa are having.
What does Alpine give you or take away from you that you had in the DMR or didn't have?
I really love living in the DMR. Alpine, this is kind of secret, but I want to take over Sul Ross University and make Black Mountain College there. I feel like the college is actually an energy suck. Like it's not providing something good for Alpine. It's like, I don't know what they're doing up there.
Three changes you could make to Sul Ross if you owned it.
I would have a course in sustainable architecture and sustainable landscape design. There's a guy, Brad Lancaster, I think he's from Tucson or Phoenix. He does this rainwater harvesting for drylands. We could turn that entire campus into a food-growing, amazing mecca for people to come to and learn how to build with papercrete and learn how to put up small solar systems. It would be an absolutely phenomenal thing.
True or false? You are a vegetarian. You say prayers before you eat.
True-ish. I say itadakimasu, which is a Japanese word that means it thanks the earthworm, the farmer, the cook. It thanks all the forces sunlight that brought you your food. I will eat meat, but really only if it's something special, like if it's someone's grandmother's special thing, or if it's
not corporate
raised.
Farmed.
Yeah, not corporate farms.
You used to hula hoop. You've given it up. It now seems trivial.
I never got into the hula hoop craze, I'm afraid. Never did.
You might dance naked if you knew no one was watching, particularly cowboys.
I would dance naked even if people were watching.
All right, Alyce, let's end it there. It's 50. Okay, well, why not end it there? Thank you very much. Unless you got something to say, Ad.
No, I'm good. Thank you very much.